Welcome back, true believers and spectacular Spidey fans, to another jam-packed episode of Spider-Man Ps4 101. So with San Diego Comic-Con 2018 just being over 2 weeks away, we are still waiting with anticipation as to what new info will be shared about Spider-Man Ps4 at the Marvel Games panel on July 19th. And while we're still waiting for San Diego Comic-Con to take place, Brian Intar has continued to provide us lots of awesome details about Spider-Man Ps4 by answering lots of fans' questions on Twitter. And in this video, we are going to go over all the recent details that Brian has graciously provided us. Now, this first new piece of info actually comes from GameStop rather than Brian Intar himself, and it actually shows off a new screenshot of the game showing Spidey swinging around New York City in the nighttime. And if you're wondering where this specific screenshot comes from, it actually comes from GameStop's promotion that they're running at their stores. And huge thanks to fellow user Arrogant Ambassador for actually taking a picture of this Spider-Man Ps4 promotional card. And as you can see, the card reads Marvel Insider. Join Marvel Insider and get 50,000 bonus points plus an exclusive Marvel Spider-Man reward. And this specific card holds an exclusive Marvel Spider-Man digital wallpaper. And as you can see, the card reads, personalize your desktop and mobile screens with an exclusive image from the Marvel Spider-Man game. See the reward in Marvel Insider for full details. And just so you know, these are very limited edition cards that you can grab at GameStop. I'm sure there is another place that you can try and find them or even try and look them up online, but if you do want one of these as quickly as possible, I highly recommend to go and check your local GameStop as fast as you can. Now, moving on from that awesome new screenshot of Spider-Man Ps4 is actually the very first piece of info that Brian provided on Twitter. And once again, Brian was very thoughtful by answering lots of fans' questions about the game, starting off with fellow user The Kid. And as you can see, The Kid asks, hey at Brian Intar, will you guys add a health bar to the villains in the boss battles? And I bet you can already guess what Brian responded with.
Hell no.
Now, for me personally, I see this as a huge plus when it comes to boss battles. Sure, it would be nice to have a health bar just to see how much longer you have to fight the boss for, but for me personally, if I want to be fully immersed within a huge epic boss fight, I do not want to have the health bars on screen. And for me personally, the less of the HUD that's on screen when you're swinging through the city or fighting enemies, the more cinematic and dynamic the fight will feel for the player. And specifically what we saw during the Shocker boss fight and during the Raft demo, I'm really excited to see how the rest of the boss fights are going to look like. Now, for all you fans out there who are loving the alternate suits that we've seen so far in Spider-Man Ps4 and all the information that we have about them, you're really going to like this next answer to this question. And as you can see, this awesome question comes from fellow user The Amazing Spider Jam, who asked Brian, is there any chance that we might get a better look at the classic suit before release? And Brian simply responded with a really interesting answer of maybe. So far, the only suit that we've seen in action during gameplay segments of Spider-Man Ps4 is actually the advanced suit with the white spider logo. Now, granted, we did see a quick snippet of the classic suit gameplay during Game Informer's coverage in April, but we still haven't seen the full extent of what the classic suit can do. Although, if you did read Game Informer's magazine covering Spider-Man Ps4, you would know that the suit power for the classic suit is actually giving Spider-Man 4 times the usual damage. And even though we did see that little quick snippet of the classic suit in action, I would still love to see the full extent of the gameplay that the classic suit can offer to players. And seeing how different all of the suit powers are going to be, I'm really curious to see how the classic suit's power is going to work. Still, hopefully we can see some footage of the classic suit in action before the game releases in September. Now, continuing on with Brian's answers that he gave to lots of fans' questions, we are moving on to yet another question relating to the suits in the game. So this question comes from fellow user Jarayen, and he asked Brian, does Spidey's physique change depending on the suit he's wearing? What's the height of your Spider-Man? And even though Brian didn't answer that second question, he did answer the first one by replying with simply,
hell no.
Now, believe it or not, this was a question that fellow Spider-Man Ps4 fans were wondering about the game, is that will Spider-Man look different in a certain suit that he chooses? And the two specific suits that people were using as the example for this question is the Infinity War Iron Spider suit and the MCU Homemade suit. Seeing how the MCU Spider-Man is a high schooler compared to Insomniac Spider-Man, who is just out of college, they are two separate ages in Peter Parker's life. And given how the MCU's version of Spider-Man is a bit shorter than Insomniac's version, people were wondering if Spider-Man will in fact shrink if he is going to wear one of the MCU's costumes. But given Brian's answer, Spider-Man is going to be the exact same height when he wears every single costume. And even though it will be a bit weird to see a more adult version of Spider-Man wearing the homemade suit and the Infinity War Iron Spider suit, I'm still really excited to see how they're going to look in the game. So moving along with another question relating to the suits in the game is specifically discussing about the crafting system. And fellow user Adam Ramadan asked Brian, hey Brian, one question for Spider-Man Ps4. When you start up the game, can you see all the suits that are available, or will it be you have to craft it to see what suit it is, and once you're the right level, you'll be able to see what suit it is? if that makes any sense. And Brian kindly replied to Adam by saying, when you hit a certain level, you'll see suits that are available. So given Brian's statement, how this crafting system is going to work is that once you gain experience for Spider-Man to level up with, you will then be able to see suits that you can craft for Spider-Man to wear. And as you know already, Brian responded with hell no when it came to the question of microtransactions, so all these suits will be gained through just gaining experience when playing the main game. And I know for a fact that's going to give players a huge reason to keep playing the game to unlock certain suits that they want to wear. And I know for a fact I'm very excited to unlock all the suits that Spider-Man PS4 has to offer. Now, the last question that was asked relating to the suits in the game is actually specifically tailored to what the third pre-order suit will not be. And this comes from fellow user Abora Saglam, who asked Brian, just having a guess right now, and I'm very curious about this. Is the black suit the last pre-order costume? And sad to say, Brian responded with,
no.
So we did know from the get-go that symbiotes will not be involved within Spider-Man PS4's story, but we were speculating that the black suit could possibly be an alternate costume for Spider-Man to wear in this game. However, given Brian's statement, we can rule out that the black suit is not going to be the last pre-order suit for Spider-Man PS4. Even though the black suit won't be in the pre-order pack, I'm still holding out hope that it will be featured in the game somehow. Still, we'll just wait and see if that is going to happen for sure. Now, moving on to another really interesting detail about Spider-Man PS4 is actually a statement from Insomniac Games themselves discussing about the Collector's Edition. And shockingly enough, they stated as to when they're going to specifically reveal the statue. And given their answers, some of you may be a bit upset or actually a bit relieved. So Insomniac replied to some fans talking about what the possible statue is for Spider-Man PS4's Collector's Edition, and Insomniac Games themselves replied with, we aren't revealing until after the game comes out. Summer doesn't end until September 21st. Also, the Collector's Edition is sold out, so we don't really have to show it anyway. It's good. So I'm actually really surprised by what Insomniac has said here. As you can see from the whole picture of Spider-Man PS4's Collector's Edition, it clearly states that the statue will be revealed sometime in the summer of 2018. And some possibilities is that we thought it could be shown off at San Diego Comic-Con or even sometime in August. But clearly what Insomniac is doing is that they want to keep that a big surprise for all the hardcore Spider-Man fans out there, and since summer technically ends on September 21st, they are going to reveal it after the game is released. And seeing how top secret Insomniac is treating the Collector's Edition statue for the game, I'm really excited to see what it's going to hold for fans. Still, we'll just have to wait and see until September 7th to see what that Collector's Edition statue really is. Now, moving on with even more details that Brian has provided us, we are now going into what I like to call the hell no section of answers of questions that Brian has answered to. And as you can most likely tell from what I mean by the hell no section of answers is that every single question that you're about to see be asked from fans to Brian is that Brian simply responded with no. Now, even though Brian answered no to all these questions, some of the responses to what they are could actually be very good or a bit disappointing. However, I'll let you be the judge deciding whether or not you think Brian debunking these features are good or bad, and I will discuss about my thoughts about what I believe to be the most interesting after we go over all these tweets. Now, first up on the hell no list comes from fellow user Expressive by asking Brian, will you get to play as a villain in Spider-Man PS4?
Hell no.
As you should all know, one of the most famous Spider-Man games out there, Ultimate Spider-Man, had you play not only as Spidey himself, but also as Venom. And even though it would be cool to play as a villain within Spider-Man PS4, like possibly Martin Lee, I still feel like it's okay that we're just simply playing as Spider-Man. Still, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Next up, from fellow user Captain Spirit is Fun, asked Brian, can we unlock comics like in TASM 1 and 2? Those were cool features.
Hell no.
Now, I'm not too sure how I feel about this not being within Spider-Man PS4. Now, I do agree a lot with Captain Spirit is Fun on this subject matter, is that it was really cool to get actual readable comic books that were digitally within the video game after you collected a certain amount of collectible comic book pages. Even though Spider-Man PS4 won't have readable comic books in the game, I'm still very excited to see what the multiple collectibles will be throughout the city. Now, this next question actually may shock a lot of you because it relates to a Marvel hero that will not be in Spider-Man PS4, even though we have had a reference of him already. So this question comes from Jake asking, at Brian and Har, is Hell's Kitchen confirmed for the game, or is that section going to be blocked off? And Brian did say that it is going to be in the game because we did know a while back that multiple districts are confirmed for Spider-Man PS4's New York City. However, Jake did reply to Brian's response by saying, so that does mean there's a chance we might see Daredevil? And as usual, Brian responded with,
hell no.
So as Insomniac have said in the past, is that this is in fact going to be Marvel's New York City with lots of Easter eggs and references to the wider Marvel Universe. And like we know so far, the ones that we do know that will be in Spider-Man PS4 is in fact Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, the Avengers Tower, the Wakandan Embassy, and Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson's law firm. But given Brian's statement, even though we do know that there are going to be references and Easter eggs to certain buildings that characters affiliate with, we may not see all the characters actually appear in the game. And since Brian flat out debunked that we will not see Daredevil in Spider-Man PS4, I think that may also go with the other heroes in the game like Doctor Strange, the Avengers, and Black Panther. Even though we might get them referenced within some part of the city when free roaming, I don't think that we will see them in the game. And for me personally, I think that's completely understandable. Even though Insomniac is putting in references of the existence of different heroes in the game, we are mainly going to be focusing on Peter Parker's story as Spider-Man. So even though it would be cool to see what Daredevil looks like within this universe, it's still really nice to see that they're fully focusing on the Spidey side of the story and not the entirety of the Marvel Universe just yet. Plus, as we all know, Square Enix is working on the Avengers project, so that's mainly where all the Avengers characters are going to show up in. Now, this next question is really interesting because it relates to a certain traversal mechanic that was in Sunset Overdrive that will not be in Spider-Man PS4. And this comes from fellow user The Spider September 7th, 2018, who asked Brian, can Spider-Man ski across water like the character in Sunset Overdrive?
Hell no.
So if you didn't know, that was in fact a certain move that the character within Sunset Overdrive could do in the game, is actually skid across water in order to gain more speed. And believe it or not, that was a traversal mechanic that some Spidey fans were wondering would be in Spider-Man PS4 or not, is that you could possibly web to the back of a speedboat and skid across the water to get across the New York harbor. And even though that does sound really cool, apparently Insomniac will not be putting that in the game. And even though I would have loved to see how that would look like in this game, I'm still very pleased with the huge amount of traversal options that we have within Spider-Man PS4 already, like parkour, wall running, web swinging, and etc. Plus, the majority of Spider-Man's traversal is fully upgradable as well, so I'm really curious to see what the max potential Spider-Man can reach in this game when it comes to traversing around New York City. Now, moving on to a question that may hurt some hardcore Sam Raimi Spider-Man fans is relating to two characters that will not be in Spider-Man PS4. And this question comes from fellow user Sammy Cags, and he asked Brian, hi, huge admirer of the work you have done. Please, can you confirm whether Mr. Dickovich will be in the game and will ask Peter for his rent money? And Brian responded with that he will not be in the game. And adding on with an even funnier question is from Amy Nat, who asked Brian, will his daughter be in the game to make Peter cookies with nuts? And of course, Brian responded with,
you got any with nuts?
I have some nuts. I could make some.
Go make me some.
Hell no.
Now, of course, that was a question that was brought up all the way back in 2017 during Paris Games Week, is that whether or not Peter will in fact meet Mr. Dickovich at some point in Spider-Man PS4 in his apartment. And if you all remember, Brian actually discussed all the way back in Paris Games Week 2017 as to who we may see in Peter's apartment, and he answered with something really interesting.
Since Peter has a crappy apartment and is behind on his rent, does that mean we're going to see the return of Mr. Dickovich as Peter's landlord?
I will say that Peter's had many landlords over the years, and you'll see when you play the game who we picked as the landlord.
Oh, so it might be someone you know.
So even though those two characters of Mr. Dickovich and his daughter Ursula will not be in Spider-Man PS4, I'm still really excited to see who will be within Peter Parker's apartment. Now, moving on with a question that I'm actually really happy Brian answered no to is from Noah, who asked Brian, in any point of the game will Mary Jane have QTEs?
Hell no.
Now, for me personally, I do not mind that QTEs are in Spider-Man PS4, but I do see why some people will be upset with them in the game. Although, like Insomniac have already said, the QTEs will be used in a minimalistic amount within the game, mainly during the big action set pieces. However, it is nice to know that Mary Jane will not have any during her portions of gameplay. And for me personally, that's going to have me enjoy her gameplay segments even more. Now, moving on to a question that relates to what the tone of Spider-Man's story will be like comes from fellow user Gwenny Seton, and he asks, hi Brian, are we gonna see bad words in the game?
It's really fucking hard. Sorry, fucking hard. Sorry, it's really hard. Fucking
no.
So even though during the E3 2018 demo we did hear Shocker say,
You son of a...
he didn't fully complete that sentence. And if you did happen to keep up with Game Informer's coverage during April, you would have seen the interview with John Paquette talking about the story's tone and how they are not going to do anything that is out of character for Spider-Man's characters or Spider-Man himself. However, if you're thinking that that means the story will in fact be a lighthearted one with zero stakes, don't worry, Brian did confirm that Spider-Man PS4's story will be very emotional. So even though there's not going to be any swearing in the game, I'm still really looking forward to the main tone that the story will hold throughout the main game. game. Now, I was already assuming that this next question would in fact be responded with no, but it's nice to know for sure that that is what Brian did respond with. And this question comes from fellow user Batman Arkham Knight, who asked Brian, can we visit Raft and Rikers and visit the villains we defeat in the game? Please answer.
Hell no.
So given what fellow user Batman Arkham Knight is trying to ask out of Brian, he's pretty much wondering if you can do what you could do in Arkham Knight within Spider-Man Ps4. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, in Batman Arkham Knight, you had the ability to go within the GCPD building and talk to all the thugs that you put away, including all the supervillains that you fought in the game. But given Brian's answer, you will not be able to do that within Spider-Man Ps4. And even though that feature does sound cool, we'll just have to wait and see as to what we can do with the villains, if anything, after we fight them in the main story. Now, even though this next question is a minor detail, it's still really interesting, so I thought I would put it on this list, and it comes from fellow Spidey Squad member Mikhail Conlate, who asked Brian, can we pet dogs in Spider-Man Ps4?
Hell no.
So if you kept up with Game Informer's coverage, you would know that in the city you can find little animals running around like rats or squirrels. And even though we don't know for sure whether or not we will see dogs within Spider-Man Ps4, it's interesting to know that we will not be able to pet them. And if you're wondering why Mikhail would ask this question, basically within Assassin's Creed you could at some points pet certain animals that were walking in the city. And even though that is a really funny feature, I don't see that as a top priority within this game. We can already interact with tons of civilians in the city by giving them high fives, taking selfies, finger gunning them, and etc. And even though it would be a really interesting feature to interact with animals in the game, I think we're already getting enough interactions with the civilians of New York City. And finally, coming to the very last question of the hell no list of answers that Brian Intar provided to fans, comes from fellow user Max Lidachowski asking Brian, in Spider-Man, will there be any parkour-only ground races?
Hell no.
So I will say, this is one thing that I am a bit disappointed about. As we know already, in the city you are able to do lots of challenges that include either chasing drones, stopping bombs, or lots more. And from when I got to play the demo at E3, chasing drones is basically the equivalent of doing a race in the game. And even though it is really fun that races are back in the city, it would have been nice if there were certain races that only tailored to parkour, which I think sounds awesome. Sadly, given Brian's statement, there will not be any parkour-only races within Spider-Man Ps4, and I gotta be honest, I am a bit upset about that. Still, with all the other awesome stuff that you can do in the game, I don't see it as too big of a problem, but I would have personally liked to see it in the full game. And ending off this video with some honorable mentions of questions that were asked to Jacinda Chu specifically comes from fellow user Romano, and he asked really random question that has nothing to do with gameplay, suits, etc., but instead my sheer curiosity: how tall is Peter in the game? And Jacinda Chu interestingly replied to Romano by saying Peter is 6 feet tall in the game. And following up Jacinda's tweet, fellow user Video Game Boy VGB/Echo the World 2 says to Jacinda Chu, wait, how tall is MJ? And Jacinda replied by saying MJ is 5'8" in the game. And for me personally, I think that's a really fun fact to know about the game. Usually in the comics, Peter is about 5'10" to 5'11", but it's really cool to see how he's flat out 6 feet tall in this game. And relating to MJ's height, that's about how tall I expected her to be in the full game. But anyways guys, that was all the huge amounts of info that Brian Intar provided us about Spider-Man Ps4 within the recent days. Please let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about all the hell no's that Brian answered to fellow fans' questions, and what are you really excited about or most disappointed about given Brian's answers? For me, I'm really loving how detailed the crafting system sounds like it's going to be, but I'm really upset that there's no parkour races in the game. Still, let me know what all of you think about all these questions, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. But anyways guys, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.
You? Give me rent. You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
That wasn't cool.
He is a good boy.